Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is the Blade Breaker's Daughters in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 31, right on to the next problem. So that was a good first assignment. Sure, Byleth might have seen 2 of her students die, but she was able to save them, so she felt proud of herself. Even if she did get yelled at afterwards. If she wasn't supposed to bring back the head, they should have said so. Still, she felt good, so she made sure to get a nice breakfast before her meeting with Ria for the next mission. Hey, bye, how'd your mission go? Shay asked, sitting across from her. Went well. Apparently we aren't supposed to bring back bandit leader heads. Seriously? Then how are they gonna know we actually took them out? Shay asked, getting her sister to shrug. How'd things go for you? Pretty boring. Only problem we faced was some wolves, and it wasn't even big ones, just normal wolves. Shay sighed. Didn't even have to fight. Well, at least nothing bad happened. But hopefully your next mission is more exciting. It better be. Sighing again, Shay leaned back in her chair. Have you gotten your next mission? Not yet, I was going there after I ate. Well, I just hope my mission is cooler than yours this time. Heck, apparently you went to a sacred place. Ah, yeah. Xanadu, apparently it was where the goddess lived. Seriously? It must have been impressive. Byleth shrugged in response. It was mainly some ruins, but it felt familiar. Wait, really? Yeah, I've never been there before, but it felt like I had. Huh. That sounds creepy. I guess. So, aside from that, is everything good with your class? I'm not sure. They started getting agitated around me, but now they're not, so I don't know if they like me or not. Well, it's still early in the year, so I guess we'll see. And hey, if anyone causes you problems, tell me and I'll beat them up for you. You shouldn't beat them up. I'm a student, I can get away with it. I don't think that's how it works. That's for future Shay to figure out. I don't think future Shay likes current Shay. After a nice breakfast, Shay began to walk around the monastery. Morning classes weren't really held on the first day of the month while the professors got their missions for the month, which meant she had plenty of free time. Granted, she didn't really know what to do yet, since her fellow Blue Lions seemed on edge for some reason and she didn't know why. Part of her felt like it wasn't her place to ask since it seemed like it was a thing with all the lions, so she gave them some space. Which meant she ended up lost again while walking. How'd I end up at the cathedral? She muttered to herself as she looked around, trying to find someone she knew. Oh, hey, Lysithea. Oh, what do you want? Wanted a bit of help if you don't mind. I was trying to get to the marketplace, but I got lost. How did you get lost? For that matter, how did you not realize that until you got to the cathedral? You had to cross a bridge to get here. I don't know, this place is just way too big. I'll agree with you there, the monastery grounds are too far spread out. It feels like it takes forever to get to one place from another. And not that I get lost like some child. I didn't call you a child. And you shouldn't. I'm a fully capable, mature adult. Look, can you just help me get back to the marketplace? Lysithea scoffed, affronted. Of course I can. Follow me. All right. And so, on Shay went, following after the shorter girl. The much shorter girl, whose legs weren't as long as hers, so she actually wound up walking slower than she usually would to make sure she didn't overtake her. Why, you don't have to walk so slowly. I can keep up with you just fine. All right, if you say so. A few minutes later, Shay jerked as a panting Lysithea tugged at the back of her shirt, stopping her in her tracks. Why did you go to the stables? Shay blinked, then glanced at Argo, who was staring at her placidly from his stable. Oh, that's weird. Oh, hey Marianne. Hello, the blue-haired girl greeted before Lysithea grabbed Shay's wrist and started pulling her away. Honestly. How in the world do you function in your day-to-day life? Hey, I'm not that bad. It's just easy to get turned around here. You walked into the stables. How do you even do that unintentionally? I was taking a shortcut. Look, the marketplace is right over there, right? That's where the pond is. Ugh, follow me, now. Shay pouted, but let the shorter girl lead her along before something else caught her attention. Oh hey. What, gah? Lysithea yelped as Shay changed directions, getting dragged along by the taller girl's sleeve for a moment before she managed to steady herself and walk along with her properly. Ugh, honestly, what is wrong with you? Nothing. I just saw, hey, here we go. Hey Victor. Hey Candace. Oh, hey Shezzy, greeted the lean, dirty blonde Lancer with a cheerful, gap-toothed smile across her freckled face. It's been a while. Yeah it has. What ve you two been up to? I haven't seen you around at all. We've been around here, Victor answered, the hefty, bald, bearded merc raising a bushy black eyebrow at his captain's kid. The captain's staying here so most of us mercs have just been sticking around since he still pays us and all. You didn't know? Oh, yeah, I definitely knew. I was just busy with classes. Heh, you know how it is, not a lot of free time and all. Is that so? 'Cause Byleth has been visiting us whenever she gets a chance. He crossed his arms over his chest, his dark beard hiding the slight grin he had. Are you saying you get less free time than a professor? Hey. Meet Lysithea. Shay deflected, pushing her shorter friend forward. Hey, don't just, Lysithea gulped, staring up at two of the roughest people she'd ever seen. Hello. My name is Lysithea von Ordelia. It's nice to meet you. Oh. I know that name. Cordelia's one of the big houses. Candace exclaimed with a bright smile, earning a sigh from Victor. She just said it's Ordelia. No see. See what? Victor rolled his eyes, before nodding to Lysithea. Nice to meet you, kid. Good to see Shay is making friends. Speaking of, Shay, good on you for making friends with nobles, it's good to get those connections. Oh yeah, I know, but Lysithea is just helping me out right now, Shay explained. I was trying to find the weapon shop around here. You mean the armory or the blacksmith? Shay glanced at Lysithea. Why do you think I would know? No, actually, the armory should be where you would want to go if you wish to buy equipment directly, while the blacksmith handles specialty work, like repairing weapons and forging special orders. Oh wow, you are smart. Lysithea blinked, before puffing out her chest. Of course I am. Did you think I wasn't? Huh? No, that's not what I said. Shay looked confused, before just shrugging and glancing at her mercenary friends. Well, it was good to see you two again. I'll try to come by and hang out again. Sure thing, Shay. You just do what's best for you, alright? And make sure people are paying you for whatever work you do, Victor reminded. Bye Shezzy. Say hey to Byleth for me. And have fun with your little friend. Candace said, earning an affronted look from Lysithea. Little. But the blonde mercenary didn't pay her any mind, instead just ambling off towards one of the vendors, which earned a little laugh from Shay. Oh, that poor guy. Humph, what? What do you mean? Are you referring to the bald man? Who, Victor? No, he knows how to handle Candace, he's fine. I meant the merchant. Shay grinned as she turned and started heading for the armory, walking slowly so Lysithea can keep in step with her without falling behind again. Candace is kind of an airhead, except when it comes to three things. The first, any kind of steed, they immediately catch her interest and she adores Pegasi especially. The second, actually fighting, she's probably one of our best spearwomen and she's cold and efficient when it comes to a fight. And the third, haggling. Haggling? Lysithea asked dubiously. Yup. She gets intense, and saints help you if she thinks you're trying to cheat her. I'm pretty sure that Anna girl still holds a grudge, Shay explained, before stopping herself before she could bump into another familiar face. Which meant Lysithea wound up running into her. Hey, watch it. Sorry. Oh? Well hello Shay and Lysithea, Dorothea greeted, looking surprised to see them both. I wasn't expecting to see you two together. Are you having some kind of outing? Sort of. It's more Lysithea was helping me find the armory. Against my better judgment, Lysithea muttered under her breath, though not quietly enough to avoid noticing from Dorothea, who giggled. Well, it's very nice of you to lend your aid to our directionally challenged friend. Hey, I'm not that bad, Shay complained. Oh really? So then you weren't the one who wandered onto the field of the mock battle by complete accident. That was one time. There's only been one mock battle, Dorothea teased, making Shay huff. Though, I did have one thing I wanted to say the next time I saw you. Huh? What's up? I wanted to apologize. Well, I made some rude remarks about your sister the last time we spoke, about how intense she was being. You did? Shay frowned and thought, oh, right, you did. Well, to be fair, I've used that word to describe Byleth a few times. Yes, but you're her sister. There's a difference in how you regard her versus how an acquaintance like me does. Shay scratched her head, frowning. Dorothea, are you feeling guilty about something? Oh, that was blunt, I suppose. It's just, she saved Byrne and Ferdy so readily. She put herself directly into harm's way to keep them from being hurt, and she barely cared that she was wounded in the possess. I guess I just feel shallow after that, for assuming she was just trying to scare us when she genuinely wanted us to be prepared for how dangerous those bandits turned out to be. Yeah, Byleth isn't really the type to try and scare people intentionally. She's really blunt but also pretty honest. Though, back up for a moment, what happened with Bernadetta and Ferdinand? Did she not tell you? Dorothea asked, a bit surprised. During the mission, some bandits almost got the drop on Byrne and Ferdy, and she was hurt saving them. We almost didn't realize she was even stabbed until Byrne freaked out. Is that so? I guess it really wasn't that big of a deal if she didn't mention it to you. No, I'm pretty sure it is a big deal, she's just a dumbass sometimes, Shay said, before letting out a sigh. Thanks for telling me, I'll make sure to talk to her later. Well, do try and go easy on her. We already made class difficult for her last month, the last thing we need is her getting angry. I don't even know if Professor Byleth can get angry, Lysithea said with a huff. Well, she can. It's not pretty, but it takes a lot to get angry, Shay said before muttering. Kinda why we didn't want to come here. What does that mean? Lysithea asked. It's nothing. Anyways, thanks for telling me, Dorothea, see you around. Oh, alright. Well, have fun you two. Dorothea said with a smile, before giving Lysithea a thumbs up for some reason. Huh? What was that about? Who knows? Now I do hope we can be done with your errands already, we've wasted enough time as it is. Yeah, sorry about that. Well hey, let's, Shay paused, mostly because the instant she started walking she wound up colliding with someone. She almost thought it was Lysithea at first, since the person was pretty short, but that didn't make much sense since Lysithea was standing to her side. Eep, squeaked Bernadetta, holding up the book she just bought like it was a shield. Huh? Oh, hey Byrne. Don't kill me? Shay blinked as the short girl promptly fled in the opposite direction, before she seemed to realize that would take her past the gates and instead fled down an alley. Huh? Did I do something? Who knows? You're a tall mercenary who hangs around with ruffians. Not only that, but she's plainly terrified of your sister. It would almost be a surprise if Bernadetta wasn't afraid of you. Huh? I guess that's true. Still feels weird though. Shay tilted her head, thinking. I kind of understand why Bai was chasing her now. Is this some kind of predatory instinct? No, I just want to figure out why she's afraid of me now. Though I guess she is pretty small and rabbit-like, huh? She probably would be fun to chase. Lysithea just sighed before grabbing Shay's wrist and pulling her along again. Honestly, it was a wonder the distractible girl was able to get anything done. As she stood outside of Ria's office, Byleth took a quick breath to steel herself and kept her face even as she entered. Waiting inside for her were Seath and Ria, the latter of whom smiled at her. Hello there, Professor. I see you are eager to start the month off. Why, you're here even before Professor Hanneman. I simply felt it would be rude to keep you two waiting for whatever mission my class will get assigned this month. On that we can agree. Do make sure to keep that attitude going forward, Seath interjected. Sure. So what is our mission this time? A lord in the kingdom has apparently begun to raise arms against the church, Rhea explained. While the Knights of Ceros will of course handle a majority of the conflict, I want for your class to be a part of the rearguard and assist in the aftermath. I see. Well, if the Knights would be more involved this time, then it would be safer for her students at least. Might be handy to read up on Knights' tactics to be able to coordinate with them. What exactly would we need to do to act as the rearguard? Well, war zones are unpredictable, so while we don't think any of the students will need to be in combat for this mission, there is a chance you may need to deal with any remaining forces that evaded the vanguard. Aside from that, you need only assist if the Knights ask for help. So, we're only expected to sit back and watch? That sounds odd for a mission. Even so, it is by the will of the goddess that you take this mission. The mission will also be useful in demonstrating to the students how foolish it would be to turn their blades on the church. Byleth tried to not let it show how much it unnerved her how easily Rhea was able to say that. I see. If I may ask, where exactly in the kingdom will we be going? To Gaspard territory. Excuse me? Gaspard territory, as in, Lord Lonato's territory. Ah, yes, are you familiar with the territory? I was there, long ago. Well, there is no worry if you do not remember the land well. As has been stated, you shall only be part of the rearguard. Not to mention you shall be accompanied by members of the Knights, including Holy Knight Catherine. Catherine? Yes, a fine young knight that I'm sure you will get along with. It was my desire that she meet you here, but as I have said, you arrived early. Would you care to wait a little longer for her to arrive? No, Byleth immediately responded, getting Seath to scowl. I mean, I really should be getting back to my class, and I would hate to take up any more of your time. With that, Byleth bowed, before immediately walking out before anyone could say anything else. Is everything all right? I have not seen you fidget before, Suthies noted a bit of worry in her voice as Byleth walked downstairs. I'm okay, I'm just, clenching her fists to stop them from fidgeting, Byleth tried to ease herself as she tried to ignore the heat swelling up in her. I think I need to hit something. After managing to buy a new sword, since her last one had started getting damaged beyond repair, Shay was able to make her way back, mainly due to Lysithea. You owe me one for wasting my time. The young mage said, once they got back to the courtyard leading to their classrooms. Oh, sure. I don't mind doing a quick job for you if you need it, Shay said, before thinking. Though if I do a good job, mind telling others about how great I am. You are very lucky Professor Manuela doesn't mind if we're a bit late to class, Lysithea complained with a huff, before heading off to her class. See you Lysithea. Shay replied, waving her off as she went to her classroom. Well, at least there weren't any more weird comments about Lysithea not being a child. Heck, maybe her luck was turning around and she'd have a good mission this month. Please tell me you aren't serious, Professor Hanneman. Was the first thing she heard as she walked in to hear Dimitri yelling. I'm afraid I am, Prince Dimitri. That was the mission given to us this month. And why were we given that mission instead of the Black Eagles? Ingrid said, standing up yelling. I am not certain why Lady Rhea has chosen to hand out the missions as she did, but her decision has been made. So normally I wouldn't care, but she does see how bad of an idea it is to give Empire students a mission in Kingdom territory, right? Sylvain asked, his usual mirth not there. I feel like I missed something important, Shay said as she walked in. Just what mission we didn't get, Felix scoffed. Wait, did we get another escort mission or something? No, we were asked to deal with bandits but... Trailing off, Dida glanced at Ash. The Black Eagles were assigned to deal with a rebellion that's being led by my father, the young, freckled boy explained. Shay paused. You mean Lord Lonato? Yeah. She slowly nodded, taking in the conflict on her friend's face, before glancing at their professor. Professor Hanneman, could you be more specific? The professor sighed, looking even older with the clear weariness he felt. Lord Lonato of House Gaspard has raised a force in an open rebellion against the Church of Syros. His justification for his actions is his claim that Archbishop Rhea had his son executed under false pretenses. He claims she is a corrupt tyrant who will kill anyone who speaks out against her and must be overthrown. Due to his grievance being with the church itself, it was decided that the Knights of Syros would handle his rebellion instead of the Kingdom of Faerghus. And we're going along with them. Hanuman shook his head. We are not. Our class will be traveling to Seward territory in the Alliance to deal with a group of bandits called. Professor. Dmitri interrupted, I must protest this decision. We all know the tensions that exist between the Empire and Faerghus at this time. How will it look to send imperial nobility, including their princess, to kill a lord of Faerghus? I am aware of the optics of the situation, Dmitri, but the decision is not mine to make. This is ridiculous. Ingrid exclaimed, are we really going to let Adrestians spill more Faerghon blood? Hanuman sighed. Ingrid, I would like to remind you of where I happen to come from before you make further remarks like that. From where she stood, Shay could see Mercedes shift uncomfortably as well. I am sorry, Professor. I let my emotions get the better of me. It's quite all right. I understand this is a tense time for everyone, but we mustn't let it overwhelm us. Dmitri straightened, a frown still on his face. Professor Hanuman, may I speak to Professor Byleth? Perhaps we could arrange to swap our missions. I don't think Lady Rhea would accept that, but very well, there is no harm in trying. Thank you, Professor. Oh, I'll come with, Shay offered, it might help out if I'm the one asking with you, right? Oh, well, yes, I suppose if you think it will help, Dmitri agreed, nodding to her before he made his way out of the classroom. To no one's surprise, Dido got up too to follow him, prompting a sigh from Hanuman. Well, I suppose we can just have a free study period for this class. Meanwhile, Shay followed behind Dmitri and Dido, idly glancing up at the big guy again. So hey, how are you feeling about all this? I don't think my opinion especially matters here. What? It definitely does. I'm asking for a reason, right? Besides, well, I'll admit I don't know much about Dusker, but I know what Kristoff was accused of. Dido glanced down at her. Did you know Lonato's son? Yeah, I did. You know how I knew Ash already from my dad working for his, yeah, that's his dad that's going to, HM. You didn't realize. I did, it just, sort of hit me there. I have kind of a weird relationship with death. A lot of people I cared about died, so I just, don't care all that much. Except sometimes I think about it and it just suddenly hits me that it still matters. I don't know, is that weird? It's one way of looking at things, Dido answered, I have my own thoughts on death. It is difficult not to. I find it easier to devote myself to a cause than to dwell though. Yeah, I get that. Ahead of them, Dmitri struggled not to join in their conversation. He had no place in it, not when he was so directly haunted by the dead. The voices almost felt louder since the mission was given, rising in indignant fury as he found himself wondering, not for the first time, if the Empire really might have been behind the tragedy. Though he wouldn't have a chance to address that concern as he found himself blinking in mild surprise at the sight of a completely empty classroom. This is the Black Eagles classroom. Huh? Oh, hey, did we get lost? Why did Shay sound happy about that? Why do you sound happy about that? Why did he ask that? Well, it shows it's not just me who gets lost in this huge place. Shay replied, smiling brightly as Dido peered past Dmitri into the classroom. The banners along the walls are Adrestian. This is the Black Eagles classroom. He decided not to mention it should be impossible to get lost on the way to the classroom in question, given that it was right next to theirs. And here I thought I found a kindred spirit, Shay grumbled. I'm sorry for disappointing you. Dmitri apologized. Nah, it's fine. Still, where'd they go? Class should still be in session, right? Perhaps Professor Eisner took her class somewhere? She might be leading them in a training exercise. Would they have left all their belongings if that was the case? Dido pointed out, noting how all their textbooks and such had been left on their desks. Was there an emergency? Dmitri asked, though he doubted there was. Sure, the classroom walls and doors were thick, but surely they would have heard if something was occurring. Emergency. Looking over, the three saw Casper running around the corner, and nearly crashing into them as he did. Hey, out of the way, I need to get Professor Manuela. Casper. What happened? Professor Byleth and Jaritsa are beating each other up at the training grounds. Now out of the way so I can go get Manuela. What? Didu, go with him for Shay. Rushing off before Dmitri could finish speaking, Shay ran toward the training grounds. And it seemed the Black Eagles were there, about 5 of the students in a crowd watching a fight go down. Professor, Jaritsa, stand down. This spar is going too far. Edelgard shouted with a look of genuine concern. Which was reasonable, given the professor and the combat instructor were currently beating the ever-living hell out of one another. A pair of wooden swords laid discarded and broken on the ground nearby as a brutal blow to the jaw drew blood from a smiling Jaritsa, a look of pure glee on what could be seen of the masked instructor's face. He barely wavered, instead responding with a vicious hook that made Byleth's head snap to the side, a sight that made Shay flinch, an unintentional noise of genuine distress slipping out that was covered by Byleth screaming in rage and outright tackling Jaritsa, bringing him down to the ground and raising her fist to cave his skull in right before a sudden deluge of cold frost rained down on her, sending a shock through her mind and snapping her out of her fury. Sorry, she muttered down to Jaritsa, who blinked up at her, his crazed grin still in place before it seemed to twitch. So you're not going to continue then, he murmured, before frowning up at her, would you mind getting off of me? I feel this may get awkward for both of us otherwise. Oh, right. Byleth stood up, brushing some frost from her hair with a sigh. Sorry, Shay. Byleth stared at her students. Her students stared back. So did Shay, who let her hand lower with a sigh of relief, and Dmitri, who was staring with an indescribable look on his face. Byleth cleared her throat, her face reddening as ducked her head. I believe I said you all had a free period. I think I can speak for everyone when I say we were curious about what you had planned, Professor, Ferdinand spoke up. Professor, is this about Lonato? Dorothea asked, prompting a flinch from Byleth that made the songstress's expression turn from horror to sympathy. Byleth took a slow breath. Class dismissed. But, Professor. Class dismissed. I am in a compromised emotional state that has left me unfit for teaching. Class is dismissed. Dorothea looked to Shay, who gave her an awkward smile back. Yeah, it's fine, we'll talk. Catch up with you later. All right. She nodded before glancing at Ferdinand and Petra. Come along, Ferdy, Petra. We should leave things here. Huh? Yes, I suppose. Oh, wait, but what about Her Highness? Now, Ferdy, Dorothea insisted while pulling him along by the arm. Petra, meanwhile, studied her professor for a moment before nodding. You have much rage, Professor. I have understanding of that sensation. We should be talking later. All right. Her piece said, she walked off, leaving the professor with 2 house leaders, her sister, and Hubert, who was doing a pretty good job of being his usual looming self. So, Shay glanced at her house leader, then at her sister's house leader, then over at her sister. Who wants to go first? What was that? Edelgard asked, deciding she should be first. I have anger issues, Byleth stated, which made Hubert snort. That much is obvious. Edelgard gave him an annoyed look before marching up to her professor. You know what I mean. You nearly beat Jaritsa to death. Why? Byleth grimaced, then paused as she heard Jaritsa mutter if only under his breath. She decided not to address that at the moment, because, yeah, that was something. I wanted to work out my aggression by sparring with Jaritsa. I lost my temper. I am feeling that aggression because I was there when Lord Lonato received the news that his son had been murdered, when his son had been executed. You're not telling me everything, Edelgard stated, frowning up at her teacher. Edelgard. Dmitri cut in, please, Professor Eisner is clearly distressed. You can't just hound her for answers. She glared back at her fellow house leader, then looked back up at Byleth. I expect answers later then. It matters to me if your emotional state is compromised. Okay. Later then. Edelgard didn't look pleased, but she left with Hubert in tow, the dark-haired boy taking a moment to regard the two sisters with open interest before he left. Dimitri sighed, scratching at his head. I don't know how she can be so, never mind. Are you okay, Professor? I'm fine. She frowned. Why are you here? Ah, it's nothing. We can speak later. My apologies for bothering you. Byleth furrowed her brows as he left, before looking at Shay, who tried to smile back at her. Need a hug? Please. The sisters took a moment to hold each other tight, before Shay frowned down at her shorter, older sister. Is it just about Lonato? I'm sure you would get mad about that, but you looked ready to kill the masked guy over there. Did you forget his name? What? No, she heard it just a little bit ago. What was it? Jurit saw. Yes, the masked man in question asked, glancing up from where he was picking up the broken equipment. Oh, nothing, I was just asking my sister why she tried to kill you. Ah. If you learn the specific reason, please inform me. I would not mind doing this again sometime. Shay blinked. Wait, are you asking her out? No. I just want to fight her again. Oh, okay. No offense, I just don't think you're her type. Byleth poked her sister, making her jolt with an indignant noise. Stop trying to influence my love life. Well, I'm not wrong, am I? Does he look like your type? I don't have a type. Really? No preferences at all. I feel like I should not be present for this conversation, Juritsaw stated, before doing the reasonable thing and just walking off with a slight awkwardness in his step, his busted lip still dripping blood. Ah, I should have healed him, Byleth realized. I think he'll be good. Naukman, what's up? The only person I think ever provoked you into trying to kill them like that was, Shay trailed off as she noticed a dark expression crossing her sister's face. Oh. She's back at the monastery, huh? Yes. Thunder Catherine. The only person Byleth ever genuinely hated. Ah, yeah, that's going to be Edelgard. I can't find Manuela, she wasn't it, huh? Casper blinked, staring in confusion at the much emptier training area. Hold on, where'd everybody go? I guess off to do their own stuff. Shay offered, before giving Casper a confused look. What took you so long anyway? Well, I was trying to find Manuela, but she's not in the infirmary. I couldn't find her at all. Casper, I think she's teaching her class right now, Byleth said. Oh, yeah, that would make sense. Huh. He shrugged. Well, is everything okay here? Byleth glanced at her sister, then shrugged. We're good. Shay frowned a little, but... Yeah, we're all good here. Thanks for trying. Oh, no problem. I'm glad it wasn't something serious. Shay glanced at the bruise forming on her sister's cheek. Yeah, nothing serious. Chapter 32, Recuperation. After making sure her sister had healed herself up, and was properly laying down in bed before she left, Shay was off to do the one thing that seemed like the best course of action. That was to, of course, talk to her dad. Hey Dad, you better not be busy. She shouted, walking into his office, catching him off guard since he was reading some reports. Mind telling me why you're coming in so loudly? Byleth and Juritsaw almost killed each other cause Byleth met Catherine. What? Pushing himself up out of his seat, Gerald nearly charged off before Shay stopped him. It's not okay, but they're not fighting anymore and I made sure Byleth was in her room before coming here. Letting out a heavy sigh, Gerald collapsed into his chair. That Demria, if I had known she was assigning Catherine to this mission, I would have fought harder to make sure Byleth wasn't given it. Speaking of, why exactly are students having to deal with a rebellion? I'm not the best at politics, but it seems like a bad idea based on how the Blue Lions are acting. Technically, the students are only part of the rear guard, so they shouldn't have to deal with any fighting. Aside from that, Ria is using this as a way to teach the students not to turn against the church. So she's just showing off how strong her knights are? Shay asked, feeling disgusted. Try not to say that so loudly. Last thing we need is to piss someone off, Gerald said, sighing again. But that's pretty much it. Ugh, this place continues to be great, just make sure to check on Byleth later, okay? I will. Thanks for telling me, Gerald thanked as he rubbed his head, feeling his age again. I'll see what I can do with the upcoming mission, okay? Yeah, thanks. Leaving with a frown, Shay couldn't help but feel restless as she began to make her way down. I must say, I knew your sister was not fond of that knight, but I didn't think this would happen. Not now, Arvel. Do not misunderstand me, partner. While I may not like your sister, even I do not wish to see her like this. It may be your destiny to defeat her, but there is nothing to gain from defeating the downtrodden. Thanks. Do not mention it. Also, that Regan child is waiting for you. Huh. Blinking, Shay saw Claude was indeed at the bottom of the stairs. Hey there, Shay. Heard there was a scuffle. Not up for any banter right now, Claude. I get it, something bad happened so you're not in the best of moods. But as your friend, I want to check up on you. From what it sounds it was fairly serious. It is. How about we head somewhere else so we can talk? Claude said, before gesturing to her to follow him. Come on, it'll do you good to have someone to talk to. Huffing, Shay followed behind him, with the two ending up in the greenhouse, currently devoid of students or gardeners. So, mind telling me what happened? Claude asked. Well, I don't remember if I've explained this to you yet, but basically a few years ago, my family and I worked for this guy called Lord Lonato, the same one the new mission is about. He's also Ash's adoptive dad, and, well, some of the Knights of Syros came by his place, I guess looking for evidence. I had a run-in with them and, I wouldn't say she hates all of them or anything, but they put her on edge. She must have really liked Lonato then. Or his son. I can't really speak for Byleth. Shay shrugged. I wasn't there for it, she kind of just ran ahead of me and into trouble. It was scary, but she was alive afterwards, so that's all that matters. Claude nodded, looking thoughtful. Well, it's good to know what set her off, unless there's more. You're kind of nosy, you know that. He just grinned. I've been told that before, sure. Sorry, it's just interesting. The rumor mill is working overtime since the news spread that the newest professor and the combat instructor apparently fought until their weapons broke and then started punching each other. It's almost like something out of a story, you know. It's not nearly as cool when it's your own sister involved, Shay muttered, glancing away from him. Yeah, I can understand that. Kind of wish I had siblings like how you have, Byleth. Having someone in your corner like that, anyway, it's not all fun. I actually had a few of my classmates wanting to pass along well wishes to teach. Leonie and Marianne both wanted me to say they hope she's okay if I ran into you first, and Lysithea even asked me to check up on you. Shay sighed. Not that I don't appreciate the concern, but could you pass along to Lysithea that I'm not completely helpless? I know I get lost easily, but that doesn't mean I'm hopeless. Hey, all I said is that she's worried. As for whether she thinks you're actually completely incompetent or not, I can't say, but I'm willing to bet it's the latter. So she does think I'm competent. Maybe. Ask her yourself. I think she had fun spending time with you today, so why not? She did? Huh. Bit of a surprise to hear. Well, she didn't seem as annoyed as she usually is when mentioning why she was late, so there's that. Oh, what's this, a secret rendezvous in the greenhouse? A voice Shay didn't recognize caught their attention as the two looked over to see a tanned blonde walking into the greenhouse. Didn't think I'd stumble onto one of these so early into the year. Huh. Glancing over, Shay could see Claude studying her for a moment. Well, she is attractive, though maybe a bit too brash for my tastes. Shut up, Claude, Shay said with a sigh. Hey, just giving my own thoughts. Well, if you two do decide to have a rendezvous in the future, I'm gonna warn you, the greenhouse isn't the place for it. People get mad if you accidentally step on any of the plants, the knight said, which, right, she was a knight. Ah, but if you don't mind me asking, mind telling me if you know where Professor Eisner is? Why are you asking? I was hoping to have a spar with her, went by her classroom but it was empty, and some students said she dismissed class early. She's not feeling well, so she's getting some rest. Ah, damn it. Was hoping to face off against her. Oh well, I have plenty of time to do so. We'll make sure to pass on the message, Thunder Catherine. Yeah, I'll dash. Wait, did you say Catherine? Shay asked, getting Claude to quirk an eyebrow. That I am, Holy Knight Catherine, and if you're in the Black Eagles class, we'll be working together at the end of the month. I'm in the Blue Lions. Oh, cool, that was my house back when I was at the academy. Right, Claude, we can talk later, Shay said, before heading out of the greenhouse, brushing past Catherine without a word to her. Did I interrupt something important? Professor, are you awake? Byleth's eyes slowly opened as she heard someone knocking on her door. As she got up, she felt a twinge of pain in her jaw and realized she didn't properly heal herself after her fight with Jiritsa. Professor, it is nearly no. Hello. Edelgard cut herself off as the door opened, showing a disheveled-looking Byleth. Hello, Edelgard. Professor, are you aware that classes have already started for today? Oh, sorry, let me get ready, Byleth said, about to close her door so she could make herself look at least a bit presentable before class. Though before she could, Edelgard stopped her. I already took the liberty of telling everyone to have a free study day. That, and I have a feeling you may still be emotionally compromised, as you put it. I'm doing better, I can teach dash. Professor, as your student, I do not think it would be wise for you to teach today. Especially if something were to happen to cause you to slip into a state of anger again. No, Byleth couldn't say that wouldn't happen, especially with the mission this month and who'd she be working with. See, Professor? Your thoughts alone are working you up. Okay, classes can be self-study for today. Did you need anything else? Yes, actually. I was hoping you'd indulge me in a request. What would that be? Byleth asked as she saw Edelgard give her a small smile. Would you care to join me for tea? Chapter 33, Clearing the Air. The tea tastes different, Byleth noted after taking a sip, her head tilted curiously at the teacup in her hand, its sides covered in small red flower designs. Edelgard tried not to laugh, though she did let a smile show. I imagine it would, Professor. This is bergamot. It's a more citrusy blend compared to the sweeter tea Mercedes and Annette were having. What do you prefer? In general? I suppose I prefer stronger flavors. Bergamot and the Hresvelg blend are my favorites, though I will admit, it feels a little egotistical to call my family's particular blend my favorite. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Did you grow up drinking it? My elder sister introduced me to it. Perhaps that accounts for some of it. She passed away, so I suppose I associate it with happier memories. Right, I heard about that. Edelgard paused. You did? I mentioned we were in Inver a few years ago, right? I remember Victor being upset because he heard the princes and princesses all got sick. Edelgard had a slight frown at that. He was really mad at that Duke Aegir person because of it, though he didn't really like the Duke to begin with. And Victor would be a member of your father's mercenaries. Right, I should have mentioned. Do you want me to introduce you to? He's in town right now with the others. Perhaps another time. I am a little curious as to why he holds such strong opinions towards matters regarding the Empire though. That's because he came from the Empire. From HRYM specifically, so he doesn't like Duke Aegir because of what happened to HRYM, and he doesn't like him even more because of how he led the insurrection. I suppose it didn't occur to me that a mercenary would. Byleth watched Edelgard think for a moment, then took another sip of her tea. There was a citrus taste to it, though she couldn't really place what fruit it tasted the most like. I think part of it is that Victor likes kids, so he didn't like imagining what happened. Ezra, another mercenary, calls him a soft heart in the body of a brute. Edelgard's lips twitched in sudden amusement. They sound like quite the characters. Though we should probably get back on topic. About the tea? No, not about the tea. About you, Professor. Edelgard settled back. We need to discuss your anger issues. I guess we do, yeah. Byleth took another sip of her tea, taking note that the warmth was pretty relaxing. Combined with the nice setting and the small pastries that were available, it was pretty obvious that the princess was trying to get her relaxed for this talk. It wasn't a bad move and she could appreciate the gesture. What do you want to talk about then? I would like to hear, in your own words, where this aggression comes from. Okay. I told you about Lonato. I didn't mention that the Knights of Syros came to his house and started ransacking it so they could find evidence of his son's treason. You don't believe it was treason? I don't. I don't know why the church killed him, but I think they lied about the reason. I understand. What happened with the knights? I found one named Gale keeping Lord Lonato and his children, the two youngest, in one room. Lonato was my employer and I didn't know who the knights were, so I drew my sword and told him to let the Lord go. She took a slow breath, trying to soothe the fire in her body before it could grow. I realized that it was foolish of me, in hindsight. He was a grown man and I was still short at 16. He was in full plate and I wasn't dressed for battle. It didn't matter, because I was supposed to keep Lonato and his kids safe since he was the client. Thinking back, I know Gale didn't want to actually hurt anyone. He told off another knight for trying to attack me, and I think he was trying to get me out of the house and away from the other knights so they wouldn't try to kill me. It's hard to tell though. We were negotiating, in a sense, when she took another breath and loosened her grip on the teacup so she wouldn't break it. Thunder Catherine smashed her shield into me. She also disarmed me of my sword. It happened quickly, and she held me at sword point. I think she was going to kill me. She was willing to and protested when Gale told her to leave me alone. Then Lonato saw her and called her a murderer because he realized she killed his son. I don't know exactly what happened, but he was sure of it and she reacted like she did. So I don't know why she was there. The only thing I could think of was that she wanted to hurt him further. To mock him with his son's death, maybe. I don't know if that's true, and I can't be sure. Not unless I actually interact with her, and I don't think that would be a good idea. Why not? Edelgard asked, and Byleth blinked at the immediate response. Because I think I would try to kill her. Are your emotions really that out of control? I find that hard to believe, given how you usually are. Yeah, I know. I don't know why I'm like this. Emotions are difficult for me. I can tell what other people are feeling, I'm not oblivious, it's just that my own emotions don't come up easily. Everything is muted. It helps to look at Shay and see how she feels about things to understand how I'm supposed to react, but I just don't feel things strongly. Except for anger, apparently. Was that time with Lonato and Catherine the first time you felt anger that extreme? Yeah. And have you felt it since? No, there are times where I feel irritated, it gets easy to slip into that feeling. But I thought I had a handle on those emotions. She let out a sigh. Guess I was wrong. Professor, this might just be my assumption, but it seems that the problem doesn't just stem from your anger, but the rest of your emotions being unable to balance you. It is easy to focus on one thing, unintentionally or not, if it seems that much bigger than the rest. So am I just supposed to live with this then? Byleth asked as she stared at the tea. Staring at the mercenary before her, Edelgard remained silent. It was different seeing her like this. From the stoic mercenary, to one full of anger and now to one who looked so very vulnerable. She hadn't known the professor for long, but it felt wrong for her to be like this. Edelgard let out a small sigh as she prepared herself. In the past, there was someone who hurt me deeply. I hated him more than I ever thought I could hate someone else. And then one day, he died. Seeing the cup in her hands trembling, she set it down. In the moment, I felt relieved that he was finally gone. Yet afterwards, despite what I felt, I realized I would never find closure. I may be unable to understand your anger, but I can say this much. If you don't face your problems, you will never be able to grow past them. Byleth slowly nodded. You're right. Thank you. You don't need to thank me. Just resolve your issue. I'm getting tired of all these free study periods. Right, I need to rethink my lesson plan. We're behind now. I'll think about it later. For now, do you know where Catherine is? I'm not sure why you think I would. Oh, all right. I assumed you would. You seem well informed. She glanced over to the bushes. Hubert, do you know where Catherine is right now? There was a faint noise like an aggrieved sigh, before Hubert stepped out from his cover with a faint frown. You knew I was there the whole time. Yeah. I live with Shay. I need to keep situationally aware because she doesn't. That prompted a slight smile. Well, that I can fully understand. I resent whatever implication you are making there, Hubert, Edelgard chided. I didn't mean you, Your Highness. Regardless, you should be able to find Thunder Catherine at the Knights' Hall. She appears to spend most of her time either there or at the training yard. Understood. Thank you, Hubert. And thank you for the tea and advice, Edelgard, Byleth said as she stood. You're welcome, Professor, Edelgard replied. Would you like to do this again sometime? Byleth blinked, a brief look of surprise crossing her face before she nodded. Sure. Just ask me whenever and I'll be up for it. Edelgard smiled and waved off the professor, watching her leave before she glanced up at Hubert. That went well. I suppose. I didn't realize I'd been so obvious though. I think it wasn't obviousness on your part so much as skill on hers. And she is quite skilled. Not to mention driven, thoughtful, and loyal. And she has a grudge against the Knights. You know, you could have allowed that grudge to fester instead of resolving it. It would have made for a decent lever to push her with. I don't need someone blinded by rage on my side, Hubert. You saw how she was with Juritsa. That type of fury would make her a liability. True enough, I suppose. Juritsa on his own can already be quite the handful. Yes, well I suppose we should go back and tell the others that she'll be teaching again on Monday. She is quite the lucky one to not have to worry about Sundays, Hubert mused as he followed behind his liege to the classrooms. It seemed the rest of the class was just as restless as the professor was, as when they arrived they found none of them studying, and in fact several coming up to her. Hey, Edie, is everything okay with the professor? Dorothea asked, concern evident on her face. Yeah, she's not still her cause I wasn't able to find Manuela yesterday, right? A small bit of guilt was evident in Casper's voice. A curious change from his usual boisterousness. She's doing fine, Edelgard reassured. The professor is simply attending to personal matters for today, but she can get back to teaching on Monday. May I be offering that we do something for her? Petra asked, equally worried for their teacher. Yes, I would hate for our professor to end up like that again. Perhaps we should ask her if she needs assistance with anything when she gets back. Ferdinand mused. We'll have to wait and see when she returns, Edelgard said, heading to her seat. For now, let's just make sure we don't get too far behind. The professor isn't mad at us, right? Bernadetta managed to squeak out, before trying to sink into her chair as Edelgard looked over at her. I think we would be hard-pressed to make her mad at us. Her sister on the other hand, not so much, Lindhard cut in, getting Bernadetta to squeak. She was quite offended that I asked for a lock of the professor's hair to study. Lynn, that sounds weird, Dorothea pointed out. The professor didn't think so. She cut off some of her hair there and then for me. I shouldn't have to say this, but don't ask the professor for her hair, Edelgard muttered, getting no response from him as he focused on his book. Well, speaking of hair, I did want to ask you something, Edie, Dorothea said. And that would be? Well, you know how I asked if you would go into town with me? Do you think we should ask the professor to go with us? It feels like I should make it up to her after how we were last month. And what exactly does that have to do with hair? The place I wanted to go to is a hairstylist. And they apparently have some cute accessories too, and, well, no offense to the professor, but she definitely seems like the type to need help when it comes to fixing up her hair. The professor's hair did tend to be quite loose and messy. Very well then. I'm sure the professor wouldn't mind being invited along. Yes. Ah, you're the best, Edie. Edelgard smiled at the praise, even as she couldn't help but wonder what Dorothea would think of her if she knew just how many dark deeds she had already committed. And how many more she was planning to commit. Catherine, wielder of the Thunderbrand and Holy Knight of Ceros, didn't usually have a lot of downtime. She normally had duties to attend to or tasks to handle that would keep her busy for weeks or even months at a time, so just being back at the monastery without anything to do until the next mission was making her restless. She never liked sitting still, ever since she had to sit through tea parties as a little noble girl needing to learn etiquette. It didn't help that the mission coming up for her was a complicated one. She let out a slow sigh as she stared up at the ceiling, laying back on a couch in the lounge. One leg was propped up on her knee and her arms rested behind her head, forming a sort of pillow as she believed in Lady Rhea, more than anything. She still saw Lonato's face in her mind though, perfectly recalling the moment when he realized she was the one who sold out Kristoff. She should have listened to Captain Gale and stayed away, but... Thunder Catherine. Oh? That was a new voice. Catherine glanced over at the woman standing beside the couch, taking note of her teal hair and cobalt eyes, before she shifted to sitting up in one swift motion, her feet on the floor as she raised an eyebrow at the woman wearing a gray coat over a black and pink top. Yeah? If you're looking for me, you found me. I heard you were looking for me. Oh. Yeah, that's right. You must be the new professor then. She grinned as she pushed herself up from the couch, her grin getting wider when she noticed the new professor was shorter than her. So you're the one everybody's been talking about. Heh, I must have missed you earlier. I was planning to introduce myself after you got the mission from Lady Rhea. The woman just nodded. Is it Thunder Catherine or Dame Catherine? I don't want to be impolite. Not exactly what I expected you to say, but all right. Thunder Catherine isn't really a proper title, but I like it better than Dame. You can just call me Catherine though, I don't need a title. Understood. Wow, this girl had a really dull voice. It was hard to tell if she was just like this naturally, or if she was holding herself back for some reason. You know you don't need to be so stiff around me, right? I'm just interested in the new professor everybody is talking about. She let her smirk get a bit sharper. I want to know why Lady Rhea seems to think you deserve special treatment. I can't really see why, considering you don't seem to be anything more than a skilled mercenary, and I've seen better than you before. 4 years ago, my father was employed by Lord Lonato of House Gaspard. I worked for him too, the woman said in the same completely flat tone even as Catherine's eyes widened. I attempted to defend him from the knights I saw ransacking his house, and you blindsided me before holding me at sword point and threatening to kill me. Huh. Now that Catherine really looked, she could see the resemblance between the girl she encountered then and the woman that was facing her now. She worked her jaw, thinking about the kid that stared up at her back then. The hair and eyes were the same. Guess the goddess does work in strange ways. Do we have a problem? I have a problem with you, yes. It seemed like it. You're being pretty stiff there, Professor. Catherine grinned, though the smile didn't reach her eyes this time. If you joined up looking for vengeance, I have to say, I admire your commitment. The woman shook her head, her eyes never leaving Catherine's. I never wanted to come here. Lady Rhea insisted. She also insisted I teach. I don't mind that. It's been tricky, but not too bad so far. I don't mind the other knights either, so you don't have to worry about that. Who said I'm worried? My name is Byleth Eisner. You didn't ask for it. That's rude. Heh. Well, you did distract me with this talk about you holding a grudge. So, Eisner, what should I expect here? Are you going to sabotage the mission against Lonato? No. A mission is a mission. Catherine frowned, staring into the other woman's eyes. You really mean that, huh? Well, aren't you heartless? That broke through whatever calm facade Eisner was trying to put up. And while she wouldn't admit it out loud, Catherine felt a jolt up her spine at the sudden, hate-filled glare the professor gave her. She'd been on the receiving end of a lot of glares in her life, the worst probably being Lonatos on that fateful day, but even that paled in comparison to the sheer murderous rage in Byleth's gaze. This woman genuinely wanted her dead. Then it was gone in an instant as the professor regarded her with a calm that had to be forced. You wanted a spar, right? I was asking for one, sure. Though I'm not sure I should go for one when you look like you want to tear my head off with your bare hands. I think that's a very good reason why we should have a spar. I have issues with anger where you are concerned and I almost killed a co-worker because of it. I would like to work things out in a controlled environment so I won't do that again. It was hard to tell if that was meant to be a threat or if Eisner honestly believed she'd be less agitated after a spar. Catherine had her doubts, because anger like that didn't just disappear after one fight, but... All right, if you insist. Just don't think I'll let you kill me. I wasn't planning to. Catherine huffed in some amusement, but kept her eyes on the shorter woman as she led the way towards the training yard. I'm surprised you're letting me follow behind you. Wouldn't you want to keep your enemy in sight? You're a knight. You're not supposed to be cowardly enough to attack an unaware opponent. Her grin twitched. You know, most people raising a blade towards a knight of Ceros would have been put to death for it. I'm aware. I wasn't then, but I am now. So what's this supposed to be then? It's what I said. I want to fight you to work off this anger. You can't expect me to believe that. Eisner stopped and looked back at her. Catherine, I need to do this. Either I fight you in a controlled environment, or I allow this feeling to fester and risk losing control of myself at a moment that could harm my students or my family. I would prefer the former over the latter. And how's fighting me going to help? Is this really just to blow off steam? Yes. It will help. Please accommodate my needs at this time. We are both working for the monastery, so I would prefer our relationship be cordial. But that's just it. This is just a job to you, isn't it? You don't have any real loyalty to the church or to Lady Rhea. I don't want to talk to you, Catherine. I want to fight you. Let's do that at the training yard, in a spar. And what if I wanted to fight you here and now, she asked, placing her hand on the hilt of her sword. That's a stupid idea. We're in the middle of the monastery and there are staff and students around. I think I could finish things without getting any of them hurt. Byleth stared at Catherine. I see. Then she turned and started walking for the training field again. Catherine frowned as the woman turned her back on her. She could easily pull Thunderbrand free and cut down the potential threat in front of her, but, then, an honorable knight didn't strike down an unaware opponent. Cheeky bitch, Catherine muttered under her breath as she followed the new professor the rest of the way. Hello Professor Byleth, greeted Juritzah as the two arrived, and Catherine couldn't help but stare at the combat instructor actually greeting someone politely. Have you come by for another spar? Hello Juritzah. I have, but I was planning to spar with Catherine this time. Can we use the field? Juritzah glanced at Catherine. The tall, thin guy stared, as though sizing her up, before apparently disregarding her in favor of looking back at Byleth. Are you certain? I would be a better opponent for your needs. Catherine wasn't sure if she should be offended. And was a little confused by what was going on here. No thank you. I would prefer to spar with Catherine. Perhaps later then. I did enjoy our previous time together. Okay, now Catherine wasn't sure if sparring was supposed to be a euphemism or not. Maybe? I'm just going to fight Catherine for now though. Thanks for the offer. Very well. I am here if you change your mind, he said, before walking off. Are you okay? Catherine asked once he was far enough away. He seemed kind of pushy there. Byleth blinked at her. Yes, I'm fine. Juritzah's okay. I don't mind him. You sure? That just seemed. Catherine trailed off, remembering who Byleth happened to be. Though, still. I'm just saying, if he seems like he's coming on too strong. Huh. Yeah, okay. She regarded Catherine with an odd look, one that was hard to discern with her dull gaze. Juritzah was the one I almost killed. I'm not sure why he wants to spar again after that. She looked over at the instructor, then shrugged. I don't think it's my place to say. We should get our swords ready. Yeah, all right. And soon enough, Catherine was facing off against the newest professor, her hands on the dulled broadsword in her grip. Eisner stood across from her, one hand on her own sword, her other hand free. It wasn't a duelist's pose, so maybe she left the other hand free for casting. It was hard to be sure, but there was no unease in her stance. The woman really was practiced at this sort of thing. This is a foolish idea, muttered Suthies in Byleth's head. You can't be sure you'll really hold back in a fight, not with this fury bubbling beneath your skin. Byleth merely took a slow breath, before nodding to Catherine, affirming that she was prepared. Ready? Juritzau asked, acting as the referee. Not that either woman really thought he'd step in if things looked like they were escalating. Which was reasonable, because he wouldn't. He would, however, raise his hand and lower it swiftly to start the march, as requested. Begin. Neither swordswoman hesitated. Both rushed forward in a series of swift strikes to test the other's mettle. There was no wavering in their steps nor their swings, and Catherine felt an unintended grin spread over her face as she gained a sense for how the other woman fought. While it annoyed her to admit it, Eisner definitely was skilled. There was strength behind her blows, despite mostly keeping to one hand, and she had a strong awareness of her surroundings. The moves she made were quick and efficient as she pressed her attack, but, what was probably the most interesting part to Catherine, she wasn't going for any cheap shots. For someone who harbored a grudge against her, the professor was fighting Catherine like this genuinely was a spar. There were no sudden attacks, no aiming for her head or eyes, and the one time she suddenly thrust her hand forward as though she were going to cast, she pulled it back with a frown on her face, the motion clearly done on reflex instead of intentionally. Catherine didn't even press her advantage at that misstep, instead taking the moment to disengage and examine the other woman, who looked barely winded from their exchange. Byleth wasn't even sweating yet, and that honestly made Catherine want to fight all the harder. Come on, you can come at me harder than that, she encouraged, not even caring to hide her grin. I suppose I can, Byleth replied, before lunging in with a sudden thrust that Catherine deflected. More thrusts were soon to follow, clearly aimed at pushing Catherine back, so the knight instead stepped in close and responded with a heavy swing to knock the professor off balance. Byleth didn't falter for long though, moving with the motion to swing hard at Catherine's shoulder. Easy enough to block, and then it was back to exchanging blows as Catherine pressed her attack, cutting quicker and quicker. The professor was good, that much was clear, but Catherine liked to think she was better. She was a genuine sword master, after all, and she started putting a bit more oomph into her swings. Faster, sharper cuts kept Byleth on the defensive, her grip on her sword adjusting to compensate before another heavy swing sent her skidding back. But Catherine didn't let up, moving straight into the professor's guard and keeping up with her onslaught. She actually felt kind of impressed to see Byleth hold her own. Not once had Catherine's blade actually connected with the professor's body. She always moved out of the way just in time or brought her sword up to block, preventing any real damage to herself as the fight dragged on. Even still, she wasn't invincible, and Catherine smirked to see a bead of sweat rolling down the side of Byleth's head. She thrusted her sword forward, deliberately overextending as her blade scraped against Byleth's, holding it back yet leaving Catherine open if the former mercenary wanted to punch her. And, to her amusement, the professor did try to swing for her, which meant it was fully fine for Catherine to block that blow with her arm, leaving only one hand on her sword, before aiming a kick for the professor's side. Byleth's eyes widened and she brought up her knee to block, falling for the feint and letting Catherine yank her sword back before driving it into the professor's sternum. Maybe a little too hard, given Catherine actually knocked Byleth to the ground there. Ah, crap, are you okay? Ow. Byleth replied, laying flat on the ground. She moved her hand to her chest, massaging the spot where Catherine landed her hit. That hurt more than I expected. Well, a training sword is still a weapon. Just be glad it wasn't a real one or we probably wouldn't be talking now. I am aware. She lifted her head. You're good. Heh. Well, not to brag, but I am one of the top knights of Ceros for a reason. Catherine crouched down beside the fallen professor. So, how are you feeling now? Better. I would have lost to you if we had fought for real years ago. And that thought makes you feel better. Not that thought specifically. It's just, why did you go to Lonatos? Catherine sighed. It's stupid. I was stupid. I can't say I'm much better these days, but back then, I was so stupidly sure of myself that when, well, after what happened with Kristoff, I thought I could actually make things right. I thought I could apologize and make him understand why things had to be the way they did. And I didn't think for a second that explaining I'm the reason his son is dead would set him off. Stupid, right? Extremely, yes. Catherine snorted, then gave Byleth a glance. So are you just naturally that dull-voiced? Or are you still holding back some anger? My voice is naturally like this. And I'm also holding back some anger, she responded, getting up. I'm still angry at you for what you did, but I'm angry at myself for not being strong enough. It was just a spar, you know. And you would have been much stronger if you used that sword of yours, Byleth said, staring directly at Catherine. I still have a long way to go before I can pay you back for blindsiding me. Not sure if I should take that as a threat or not. Take it as you will. Catherine had to admit that, unintentionally or not, the young professor could get under her skin. Are you done sparring? Juritzau asked, coming up to the two. Would you not want to cross blades with me again? Geez, Juritzau, you really have to work on your game. Pretty sure there are better ways to flirt with someone than to just ask them to fight you. And that got both of them to stare blankly at Catherine. What? Perhaps another time, Juritzau said before leaving. Yeah, I'll see you later, Catherine, Byleth said as she left as well. Starting to think I misread that. Granted, she also didn't really know the combat instructor that well. He tended to keep to himself, so the only thing she knew was that apparently he was referred to the academy by the Prime Minister of the Empire. Still, he wasn't the main interest at the moment. She wasn't sure what to make of the new professor. She was skilled, definitely above the average merc, but even if this was a serious fight, Catherine was sure she'd be able to win. Even so, there was something off about her. Nothing she had seen there had told her why Lady Rhea had hired her, but, normally Catherine was able to figure out what crest someone had, especially after a fight, yet for whatever reason, she couldn't tell anything about the professor's crest. I'm definitely gonna have to keep an eye on her. Chapter 34, A Day Out. There you are, Professor. Dorothea greeted the approaching blue-haired mercenary as she and Edelgard waited for her by the monastery gates. I was starting to wonder if you weren't going to be able to show up. Sorry, Dmitri wanted to know if he could talk with me, but I let him know I had to go to town first. I wonder if it has to do with the mission this month. Edelgard guessed. Hey now, none of that, today's one of our days off, so none of that serious talk. Dorothea cut in, before beginning to push the two out of the monastery. You need to properly rest and relax to be at your best. Isn't that right, Professor? Ah, yeah. Pushing yourself too far can be bad. See? Professor's orders that we take it easy. Dorothea said with a smile. Hence why we're going to a hairstylist. It's the perfect place to sit down, relax, and share some gossip. What are we doing? Byleth asked, having not actually asked before why the two had wanted her to accompany them. Getting our hair cut and styled, of course. No offense, Professor, but you definitely need it. It almost looks like you cut off your own hair with a dagger or something. I do, Byleth answered completely sincerely. Sometimes I ask Shay to do it, but I cut my hair when it's getting too long. Professor, you really need to take better care of your hair. After all, how are you going to charm anyone like that? Though I guess the rough and gruff type might help you charm someone. Why are people so interested in my love life? Excuse me, Professor. Edelgard decided to speak up, not wanting to be completely left out. Shay keeps trying to influence it. Sylvain asked if I kissed any guys or girls. Even Catherine thought Juritzau was trying to flirt with me, and then there was that time with Manuela when I found her drunk. Oh. Now that's what I meant when I mentioned gossip. That all sounds very interesting. Dorothea cheered, before giving the professor a sideways glance, though, I have to ask, what exactly happened with Manuela, Professor? Curiously, and to the immediate fascination of both girls with her, Byleth actually turned a little pink as she glanced to the side. Ah, she gave me some advice about not getting with men who can't ignore a little mess. Oh? Is that all? Dorothea asked, her curiosity piqued. I think if I mention anything else, it will be embarrassing for Manuela. Professor, the fact that you're not mentioning anything else leaves far too much room for people to get the wrong idea, Edelgard explained. It's less of what she said and more the lack of clothes she had on when she said it. Both eagles paused at the mental image that presented, before they independently decided they would never mention that part to anyone else for the sake of Professor Manuela's dignity. Byleth, meanwhile, continued, still faintly blushing. She also said I was pretty, which felt nice. Oh? Are you not used to compliments, Professor? Dorothea asked, getting her thoughts back in order quickly enough to respond. Not really. Not about my appearance, at least. Then it makes perfect sense for us to make today about your appearance. You really are beautiful already, Professor, so just think of how you'll look after a trim. And perhaps after, we could see what makeup and clothes would work best. Why don't we focus on one thing at a time, Dorothea? Edelgard suggested, noticing that Byleth looked a little overwhelmed. If you insist, Edie, though you can't tell me you wouldn't want to see our professor dressing up. I have a feeling you and I have very different ideas of what it would mean to dress her up. Why Edie, you can't think I would try to take advantage of our poor professor. Besides, shopping for lingerie should be saved for at least the second date. What? Byleth asked, starting to feel odd about this outing. Not bad, exactly, just, Dorothea just giggled though, which didn't help. Nothing, Professor. Now come along, the stylist is just up here, and then we can get to sharing all those interesting details about the people invested in your love life. Dread was an emotion Byleth didn't feel often, but as she saw Dorothea's eager smile and felt Edelgard's considering gaze, she was pretty sure that was the exact emotion she felt at the moment. Then she actually sat down in the barber's chair and it turned out to be surprisingly cozy. Having her hair brushed felt nice and brought back memories of when she was small and her dad would try his best to take care of her naturally long and messy hair. Usually to little effect, but it was the thought that counted. Sua. And then Dorothea spoke up again and that feeling returned. Come on, Professor, you can't talk about how interested people are in your love life and then not tell us anything about it. Edelgard glanced over at the two, not saying anything as she sat back for her own trim. Mostly because she was somewhat curious too, even if she wouldn't admit it. I know you talked to Shay. You've probably already heard everything from her. I've heard a few things, certainly, but there's a big difference between hearing things second-hand and first-hand, Dorothea explained with a teasing smile. Besides, is it a bad thing that your little sister wants you to be happy? It's not. I like how much she cares. It's just kind of annoying sometimes. Shay likes to push things. I seem to recall a conversation we had where you said a push could be what someone needs, Edelgard noted. I did say that, Byleth admitted. I think there's a difference between a professor doing it and a sister doing it though. There certainly is, in that it is a younger sister's prerogative to needle her elders about their love lives. Dorothea giggled at the expression on her professor's face, before deciding to have mercy and move along. As for the other people interested in your love life, do feel free to slap Sylvain the next time he tries to involve himself. Why? Because he's a cad, Professor. An incorrigible flirt with no real care for those he tries to woo. A rake and a roustabout, as the songs say. There are songs about Sylvain. There are songs about the type of man he is. I imagine he tried to ask about any attraction you might have towards men as a prelude to his own advances. No, not really. I think he was just curious. Byleth shrugged. He seemed fine with me being uninterested. Really? I have to say, I find that hard to believe. She shrugged again. It's what happened. I remember Raphael asked him if he liked men and he said he just likes pretty people. Oh, and Sylvain offered to be my wingman before that. Professor, that's completely inappropriate, Edelgard chided. He shouldn't be making offers like that, especially considering your position. Oh, I completely agree, Edie, Dorothea agreed. He would be a terrible wingman. Now, if you happen to need a wingwoman. Dorothea. Joking. Humph. I still don't know what that is, Byleth admitted. I even asked some of my father's mercenaries and they didn't have any answers. They didn't. Dorothea said, looking curious. I would think a group of hardened mercenaries would be well aware of such things. To be specific, when I asked, Ezra just choked and started coughing, Gertrude started laughing, Victor said he'd tell me when I was older, and Candace just patted me on the head, for some reason. So I think they do know, it's just none of them are helpful. Would those be the officers of Geralt's mercenaries? Edelgard asked. I guess. They're the ones that tend to be giving orders to the rest of them. I don't think my father really assigned official ranks. That sounds disorganized. It usually works fine. I think other mercenary groups just have one leader directing things. It's kind of like that with us, but, I don't know. I know I'm going to take over when my father retires though. Oh? You plan to inherit the family business then? Dorothea asked. Yeah. I guess this professor thing does throw that plan off. I'm not sure I would put Shay in charge though. She's good at fighting and she can lead small groups, but she's really bad at navigation and she's not that good at tactics. I think she's comfortable just being a mercenary, though I know she wants to be the best she can be. How did you and Shay meet? Edelgard asked. You said before that you shot her with an arrow. Well, I hadn't heard this story, Dorothea said, looking at her professor with some surprise. Ah, yeah. I was hunting for food and I didn't notice her. I think 13 at the time. I brought her back to camp because I knew my father could help with things, and then Shay just stuck around. Huh. And, how old was she when this happened? Edelgard inquired. Shay said she was 12, but my father thought she was 10. That didn't stop her from insisting she was the same age as me or older until a month ago when Manuela pointed out she looks closer to your age than mine. Byleth glanced at Edelgard, her expression completely serious. She was devastated. I see. Dorothea giggled. Poor Shezzy. She really looks up to you, huh? I didn't really think of it like that, Byleth admitted. I think it's more that she's competitive though. She can't be both. Competition and admiration don't have to be exclusive, you know. I guess. So, how much longer does this haircut stuff take? Oh, I've been done for a while, the hairdresser admitted. You just asked for a basic trim to clean things up. I was just letting you girls chat since you seemed invested. Oh. Well, thank you. And with that all done, Byleth was greeted with her brand new hairstyle. Which, well, was basically her usual one, it's just her hair looked a lot straighter and smoother and some of the messy parts were cut down. Huh. I look nice. You certainly do. Dorothea praised. But before we go. Byleth blinked as Dorothea suddenly put a pink headband on her head. Huh. What's this for? I thought it would look cute on you. And it certainly does. Right, Edie? Edelgard paused at being addressed, before taking note of the professor's new accessory. I suppose it does go well with your hair. Doesn't it? And I did notice you seem to like pink from the highlights of your outfits, so why not try adding a little more color to your wardrobe? Yeah, okay, Byleth agreed, idly checking herself in the nearby mirror. The headband did look cute, and it was a gift. So, why not? So, what next? Dorothea asked. We have the rest of the day free, don't we? True, I heard there was a shop for sweets. We could go there. Sounds like a plan. What do you think, Edie? Well, I suppose I can indulge myself a little, Edelgard responded, not wanting to make it obvious she was excited for it. In that case, why not indulge us about your love life on the way? It's only fair now that the professor has shared. There really isn't much to say, Edelgard admitted. The most would be offers for an arranged marriage, not that any were accepted. Well, I suppose that's one thing you can look forward to for the year, Edie. I can see it now, the future emperor and the love she meets while at the academy, and all the trials they face together. It sounds like something out of a play, if you do say so myself. Yes, I suppose it does, Edelgard quietly responded. What about you, Dorothea? Byleth asked as they arrived at the sweets shop. You seem popular. I suppose I am. Of course I haven't met anyone worth mentioning. Most of the nobles I've met are far from tolerable personality-wise, and the knights I've dated are far more interested in just saying they went out with a famous diva than coming back for another date. Dorothea frowned as she spoke. Why, I once met with one who was just trying to get tickets to the opera so he can take his actual fiancée. Wow. That's rude. Isn't it? If that was all he wanted, he could have just asked instead of trying to string me along like some doe-eyed schoolgirl. Byleth frowned. Do you want me to talk with him? Ha. There's no need for that, Professor. I know what talking means in this context, and I assure you, you don't need to go out of your way to get vengeance for me. People like that are annoying, but if I went out of my way to spite every idiot who wanted to get something from me, I would be spending more time plotting than I do singing. Edelgard, meanwhile, made a mental note to find out who this particular knight happened to be. She didn't think of herself as the vengeful type, but if there was the potential for this man to be a problem down the line, well, it was only right Hubert heard of it. Such thoughts could be saved for later though, as the three ladies, well, technically a princess, a songstress, and a mercenary turned professor, headed inside the sweets shop. Moments later, the trio were seated at a table outside with a box of confectionaries between them and 3 bowls of sorbet, one for each of them. Oh, this is delicious. Dorothea praised. We really must visit here more often. Take care not to overdo it, Dorothea, Edelgard chided. It may be nice to go out for sweets every once in a while, but we do still have responsibilities. If you say so, Edie. Though I can't help but notice you're already half finished with your own bowl. Edelgard reddened, before ducking her head and simply having another scoop of sorbet in lieu of responding, earning another giggle from Dorothea. Do you think I can get another? Byleth asked, her own bowl already completely finished. Dorothea couldn't help but laugh at the sight, smiling in clear delight as Edelgard frowned. Professor, you made a complete mess of your face again. Here. Oh, no need. Byleth fished a handkerchief from her coat pocket and used it to clean her face, prompting a curious look from Dorothea when she noticed the design of this particular handkerchief, including the obvious double-headed eagle insignia on it. Professor, isn't that Edelgard's? Yeah, she said I could keep it. She did she? Dorothea glanced at the future emperor with a small smile, who immediately blushed. I said she could return it later. Edelgard said, defending herself. Ah, how generous of you, Edie. Oh, Professor, if you're going up to get another bowl, would you mind getting one for Edie too? Oh, sure. I'll be right back. Do you want the peach one again? Byleth asked. Yes, thank you, though I still have some left. That's fine. I'll have the rest if you don't finish. Dorothea giggled as the professor left, before fixing Edelgard with an amused expression. So, going after the professor, are we? What? No, of course not, that was just, all I was doing was being helpful, Dorothea. If you say so, she chirped, not at all believing her friend for a second and giggling as Edelgard mullishly ate her remaining sorbet. It didn't help Edie's case at all that she obviously sat up straighter when the professor returned. Professor, perhaps we shouldn't be having too many sweets. But they taste good. Yes, but they can be unhealthy if you have too many, she said, despite also digging into the peach sorbet. They can be. Dorothea giggled. Let me guess, Professor, you haven't had sweets before? Had some with that tea party, but never before the academy. Well, in that case, I can see why you want to enjoy yourself, but at the very least might want to be careful with the sorbet. Might end up getting a brain freeze if you aren't careful. Brain freeze. It's a head pain people can get from eating or drinking something cold. Oh, so that's why my head hurts. Perhaps we've had enough for today, Professor, Edelgard said, before raising a hand out to stop Byleth from eating more, only for her to keep trying. It took both the princess and songstress to stop their professor from trying to eat more sorbet. It was certainly interesting to see how stubborn she could be over something so small. "Hey bye, there you are!" Shay shouted, making Byleth look over, blinking in surprise as she saw her sister pushing Dimitri towards her. "We need to talk to you." "Shay, there is no need to interrupt the pro dash. She's not doing anything, so it's not interrupting, right, bye?" Shay asked, before taking a look at her sister. "Did you cut your hair?" "Hairstylist did. Dorothea took Edelgard and I into town." Bringing her hand up, she offered a box of confectionaries to Shay. "Here, I brought some for you." "Okay, I really want to know what happened, but Dimitri has to talk to you first." With that, she shoved Dimitri forward a bit. "Otherwise he'll never ask." "Ask me what?" Letting out a sigh, Dimitri faced Byleth as he stood straight. "Professor, I wanted to speak to you about the mission your class received." "What exactly do you want to talk about?" "I was wondering if it would be possible that our classes could swap missions. I understand that this is something we would need to talk about with Lady Rhea, but it is my belief that sending Empire students to deal with a Lord of the Kingdom will not end well. I really only know what you all have told me about the issues between the Kingdom and the Empire, but I can see why you would think so. Are the rest of your classmates in agreement?" "Yeah, no one really thinks it's a good idea for your class to take it," Shay piped in. "Even Professor Hanneman said the optics didn't look good. Besides, this way you don't have to work with Catherine, right?" Dimitri frowned. "Is there a problem with Lady Catherine?" "A personal one," Byleth answered. "We're working on it." "Well, if it would be better for the two of you to avoid going on missions together, then that's all the more reason for us to switch assignments. That is, if you would not mind." "I don't. I'll ask my class what they would prefer. I don't know if it matters though. Lady Rhea is the one that assigns missions, so I assume she would have the final say." "Really? I was under the impression Seath was the one handing them out, though I suppose he is ultimately only carrying out her wishes, correct?" "No, you just had the wrong impression." "Oh." Shay glanced at her house leader, then frowned at her sister. "Hey, come on by, be nicer to Dimitri. He's sensitive." "I am." "Ah, sorry, Your Highness," Byleth said, before fully bowing her head in apology. "I feel as though I am being made fun of. Would it be better if I knelt?" "Please don't." Chapter 35, Making Arrangements. The next day, Byleth waited in the Archbishop's audience chambers alongside Edelgard, Dimitri, and Hanneman. As the leaders of the Black Eagles and Blue Lions, it was to be expected the four of them would be involved given their upcoming request. One which Byleth would have to make, as it seemed, odd as it was to say, that Rhea favored her. She wasn't exactly sure what it was about her, as she had no real experience teaching, and while she was certainly strong, her spar with Catherine showed there were others stronger still. Even so, she ended up in a teaching position at a prestigious academy, and had been given far bigger missions than the other professors had so far. It was easy to say that it was simply bad luck her class had to deal with bandits, but it was clear Zanata was a holy land, one that people weren't allowed to enter, and yet her class was told to do so. It would have made more sense for the knights to handle it, far safer, and that way her students didn't walk over sacred land. Barely even a day had passed after that mission before she was told to stomp out a rebellion. While Byleth herself had never dealt with a rebellion, even she could tell just what that meant, even if they would just be the rear guard. Regardless, Rhea kept giving her these missions, and most would be honored to have the trust of the Archbishop, but Rhea didn't like Shay. No, that was probably unfair. She never expressed any dislike to Shay, but when it came to the two of them, Rhea didn't pay Shay any heed. As if the only one that mattered was Byleth. And that mattered to Byleth. It was one thing to hear from her father that Rhea wasn't trustworthy, that Rhea had something to do with her mother's death and her father just couldn't trust the strangely familiar woman, but seeing how little interest she had in Shay took that strange fascination she seemed to have with Byleth and made it aggravating. But Byleth wasn't going to focus on that. She was here at her students' behest, so she was going to stay professional. Even if a part of her wanted to avoid the Archbishop entirely. "Good morning, everyone, Lady Rhea greeted them as she walked into the audience chamber along with Seath. She looked as composed as ever, her hands folded together as she took her typical position with her chamberlain behind her. To what do I owe the pleasure of having 2 professors and 2 house leaders seeking an audience with me so early in the month? I wouldn't quite call it pleasure, Lady Rhea, Professor Hanneman began, taking the lead in negotiations. Byleth was pretty sure this would be a negotiation, not just a matter of asking and receiving. My fellow professor and I, along with our students, wished to speak with you regarding the matter of this month's mission. Rhea regarded him with some curiosity. Go on. He nodded. To be clear, both of our houses, the Blue Lions and the Black Eagles, have expressed reservations with the choice to assign the Black Eagles house the mission of accompanying the Knights of Ceros to the site of a rebellion within the kingdom's territory. The current leader of the rebellion, Lord Lonato of House Gaspard, is a noble of Faerghus, and our students believe, not without reason, that sending a class primarily composed of Adrestian nobles on a mission that would more than likely involve the killing of kingdom citizens could potentially worsen relations between Faerghus and Adrestia. Is this true, Dimitri? Edelgard. Both house leaders placed their hands over their hearts and bowed to the Archbishop, before Dimitri spoke first. Lady Rhea, I am not alone among my classmates in believing that sending Adrestian students to handle a matter that is ultimately the responsibility of the Holy Kingdom of Faerghus may send the wrong message to the nobility of the kingdom. In this time of heightened tensions, we feel there is too great a risk that the situation could worsen if it appeared that nobles of the Empire were allowed to interfere in the kingdom's affairs, even at the behest of the Church. I have to agree, Your Grace, Edelgard stated, since the death of my uncle Vokhard and the horrific assassination of King Lambert of Faerghus, groundless conspiracies have circulated among the courts of both of our nations that the 2 events are linked. I do not believe it is an unfounded concern that tensions may be inflamed by the Black Eagles being sent on a mission that our fellow classmates feel so strongly about. But it's not really a matter of the kingdom to handle, is it? Seath pointed out, Lonato specifically declared that his rebellion was against the Church of Ceros, not against the Holy Kingdom of Faerghus. That means it is a matter of the Knights of Ceros to handle, and that naturally extends to the Officers' Academy. With all due respect, Seath, Dimitri began, Lonato is still a noble of Faerghus. I can agree that in this particular instance, his actions do make him a matter for the Church and the Knights to deal with, but even still, care should be taken in who specifically is selected to handle this matter. The Black Eagles are students of the Officers' Academy before they are citizens of the Empire, Rhea said, her tone polite but chiding, just as all faithful are children of the goddess before they are citizens of their nations. The goddess does not care for mortal boundaries, and neither should her faithful take umbrage with those she has chosen to carry out her will. That's not how it works. All eyes turned towards Byleth as she bluntly contradicted the Archbishop's words. Dimitri's mouth snapped shut, his own response dying before it could be spoken as he glanced at the Archbishop. Edelgard, meanwhile, simply regarded her professor with further interest. As for the Archbishop herself, no surprise showed on her face as she turned to her newest professor. And what do you mean by that, child? People don't look past things like homelands that easily. Everyone in my father's mercenary band was united under his leadership, but that didn't stop them from arguing or making comments about each other based on where they came from. It never escalated to fighting, but that was because we were all working together. Then you do see my point then. Byleth shook her head. It's not the same thing. My father's mercenary band is like this monastery. She ignored the offended look Seath gave her. People from different nations come here and unite under your leadership. That's one thing. Faerghus and Adrestia are like 2 noble houses, just on a bigger scale. They have their own responsibilities and people to care for. If one of them hires a mercenary band to clear out problems on their land, that isn't a problem. But if the other house hires mercenaries to go into their rival's land, even if it was still to handle problems for them, then that rival is going to get upset. The Church of Ceros isn't a mercenary band, Seath stated, frowning at her. It's an analogy. Byleth paused, then glanced at Dimitri. A metaphor is a type of analogy. Metaphors are more specifically comparing 2 unlike things, usually in a poetic sense. Thank you. She nodded, then faced the Archbishop again. It's not quite the same situation. Here, it's more like if the mercenary band, which is the knights in this analogy, decided to take along members of the rival house, let's call it House Crimson, on a mission assigned to them by House Azure. House Azure is fully within its rights to be upset with the Silverheart mercenaries, because they don't want members of House Crimson to be on Azure lands. If the Silverheart mercenaries decide to bring the members of House Crimson along with them anyway, even if it is to clear out a giant wolf that's causing trouble on House Azure's lands, then things could escalate between the two houses anyway, and the Silverhearts would be at fault for causing the conflict, and that can be really bad for a mercenary band. The Church of Ceros still isn't a mercenary band, Seath repeated, his arms crossed over his chest. Yes. I know. Do you not know? Seath's eyes narrowed at her. I know what a metaphor is. Okay. Good work. She gave him a thumbs up. He kept glaring at her. She lowered her hand. While I can see what point you wish to make, child, it is the will of the goddess that these assignments be given as they are, Rhea explained. Fodlan requires aid in many places, for though the goddess is merciful, it is by mortal hands that it is made turbulent. Lady Rhea, if I may, Dimitri began again, it is our intention to prevent further turbulence among our peoples. We do not disagree that Fodlan needs safeguarding, we just believe we could safeguard just as well, if not better, through a different arrangement. If the Black Eagles were sent to deal with the bandits we were assigned. Dimitri, I appreciate your reasoning, but you should not question the will of the goddess. Though her tone was patient, it was hard not to hear the reprimand in Rhea's voice. With all due respect, Lady Rhea, isn't it also the goddess's will that we humans make choices of our own? Edelgard inquired in an equally polite tone, clearly intending no offense. While some choices are clearly poor ones, we shouldn't ignore the human element here. It is our duty as rulers to act in a manner befitting our people and guarantee their prosperity. All that to say, I'm having trouble understanding why our assignments have been arranged so specifically. May I ask for your guidance on this matter? Rhea regarded the young princess of Adrestia, the sole heir of a 1,000-year-old bloodline, and smiled slightly at the memories her unwavering gaze brought her. I will gladly offer guidance when needed, Edelgard. Am I to understand that you both hold these deep reservations over what should be a simple matter? We do. Yes, we do. Both future rulers answered, one after the other, and Rhea regarded them thoughtfully. Very well then. I thank you both for being so forthright in bringing this matter to my attention. As such, I am willing to make an adjustment as needed. Though you have also brought quite the concerning prospect to my attention, that of the worsening relations between the Empire and the Kingdom. As such, rather than having the Black Eagles house alone be assigned to the mission in question, I propose that both Black Eagles and Blue Lions join forces in order to mend the relationship between these two great nations. Dimitri and Edelgard blinked, visibly caught off guard, and shared a look on instinct, attempting to confirm what they just heard was correct. Hanuman, meanwhile, nodded slowly, rubbing at his beard with a small frown. It is a solution, certainly. Though I don't think it entirely removes the issue of Adrestian nobles facing Phaergon citizens, even treasonous ones. Ultimately though, I do not have an objection to our two houses participating in the same assignment. Professor Byleth. Byleth shrugged. I guess it works. It would be like inviting people from House Azure over to act as Minders for the Crimson vassals, right? Are you still on about that? Seath asked with another frown. It works, doesn't it? Ah, Professor, before we continue, I wanted to ask, Dimitri began, glancing at Byleth, how are things between you and Catherine? Edelgard tried to avoid letting her irritation show. Of course the Lion Prince couldn't be subtle for 1 second. Is there some type of trouble between you and Catherine? Seath asked, looking towards Byleth too. It's fine. I don't like her that much. We can still work together. Truly? I could have her removed from the mission if you require, child, Rhea offered, and it was hard to miss the looks everyone gave her, especially as Dimitri's jaw outright dropped from the blatant favoritism on display. That's fine, Byleth replied, like I said, we can still work together. She's a good fighter and she'd be good to have along. Of course. Though, if you happen to have any further troubles with anyone in the church or the knights, Please, let me know. Yeah, okay. Byleth glanced at the house leaders and Hanneman, who had all managed to regain their composure before Rhea noticed. Do any of you need anything else? No, I do not believe so. No, Professor, I have said all I wished to say. After Dimitri and Edelgard's responses, Hanneman clapped his hands together. Well then, it seems we have no further problems. Thank you very much for hearing us out, Lady Rhea. Of course. May the goddess ever watch over you. And thus ended the meeting between the Archbishop and the quartet of professors and house leaders. Yet that was not the end of matters, as Byleth showed by turning to Hanneman once they all left the audience chamber. Hey, Professor Hanneman. Oh, you need not call me Professor, Miss Eisner. We are colleagues, after all. Oh, okay, Mr. Essa, my colleague. Though I suppose we could just use our given names, if that would not be too familiar. It's really not. Also, I had a question. What's a wingman? Hanneman blinked, a reaction shared by Dimitri, who paused to listen while Edelgard let out a sigh. Pardon. A wingman? In the context of dating specifically. I tried looking up the term but I couldn't find a definition. I did find some information about metaphors though, which was helpful. That does explain your allegorical tendencies back there. Well, I would never want to leave a colleague ignorant, I will admit. I am curious where you heard that term to begin with. From Sylvain. What? Dimitri exclaimed, sounding scandalized. Professor, I can't apologize enough for my classmate's conduct. In fact, I'll go get him. He needs to make things right. He ran off, prompting a sigh from Hanneman. Oh dear, I had better head that off. My apologies, Professor, we can reconvene later. Take care. Byleth watched as Hanneman hurried after his student, leaving her alone with Edelgard. He didn't explain what it meant. Perhaps it's better not to ask, Professor, Edelgard suggested. It's a silly topic to begin with. I guess. Hey, do you know what a wingman is? Of course I do. Edelgard frowned. It has something to do with wyverns, I believe. Something, metaphorical. Like the wyverns and the Pegasi. The what? Byleth paused. I guess I need to explain sex to you. That feels like something it would be important for nobles to know before now. Edelgard stared at her professor, genuinely too caught off guard to even get embarrassed. Professor, what are you talking about? Don't worry, Gertrude should still have those books about it. I'll get them. I guess I should make it a full lesson just in case. I'll think about it. Edelgard watched her professor start to walk off, then considered the enormous awkwardness that would inevitably come from having the stoic mercenary attempt to explain sex to her class in particular. Wait, Professor. You really don't need to. Unfortunately for her, Byleth had longer legs than her, and was quite difficult to catch. Archbishop Rhea settled back in the seat behind her desk and let out a slow sigh as she eased into the comfortable leather. Seath. What do you think? Her chamberlain and closest confidant let out a sigh of his own in response to her question. I hate to admit it, but the new professor did make a decent, if childish, analogy earlier. Really, House Azure, House Crimson, and the Silverheart mercenaries aren't bad names at all, particularly if one were trying to illustrate politics on a basic level. Though perhaps the Silverheart Knights would be better. Seath. No, you're right, the mercenary aspect is a core component. I couldn't in good conscience remove it, not without fundamentally altering the story she put together. Rhea sighed again, this time with more exasperation as she massaged her head. Not that part, Seath. I meant the concession I made. As well as if the political situation between the kingdom and the empire truly is so dire that my students consider the mere act of sending the incorrect class tantamount to igniting the alcohol stores. Ah yes, admittedly I don't keep up to date with all the goings-on, but it is quite clear there are tensions between the classes alone, and while the relationships have remained cordial, there is no saying what could set it off. I see, perhaps we should set up more inter-house events. It wasn't the best solution, she will admit, but it was one nonetheless. If she was to bring back her mother, then a time of war would only make things more difficult for her. I can try to see what we can concoct. There is the choir festival that's coming up, perhaps we can convince the teachers to have more of their students participate. It is a start. Let us pray that the goddess can guide us through these turbulent times. Seath seemed deep in thought, getting Ria's attention. House Golden would be too straightforward for a third noble house. Perhaps House Verdant, given Adir's dietary preferences. I see we shall have to discuss this later. Sadly for Byleth, her questions on what a wingman were would remain unanswered, as she had something else to focus on right now. As they would be working together for the mission, Hanneman suggested they teach the classes together to better prepare them. However, with the classrooms themselves being too small for two classes, they ended up in the courtyard so they weren't cramped. However, the problem with this became evident as most students were clearly keeping to their own class. This could be going better, Shay said to herself. Not unreasonably, considering the two classes were basically forming their own separate clumps on opposite ends of the makeshift classroom set up on the grass. The Black Eagles were a little more spread out among the desks, but the Lions looked like they were minutes away from forming a defensive wall and declaring their portion of the courtyard a sovereign nation. Mostly because of Ingrid, who was making a point of sitting as far away from the Black Eagle students as she could, though Mercedes and Annette weren't really helping things by deciding to sit with her. They probably had good intentions like making sure she wasn't feeling left out, but add in Ash also sitting close by and Felix being his usual standoffish self and things could be going better. It definitely didn't help that Sylvain tried to greet the lovely ladies of the Eagles, and Dorothea made a point of moving as far away from him as possible, made all the worse by Petra following her to ask what was wrong with Sylvain. Then there was Bernadetta hiding under the desk and Linhard sleeping again. Meanwhile, the house leaders and their retainers were up at the front and trying to be cordial despite the awkwardness, especially since their professors seemed to be busy trying to figure out what their lesson plan for the day was. Shay glanced over at the Eagles, wondering if she should take a chance on the more sociable of the bunch. Dorothea was usually nice, but it would be kind of awkward to approach her after Sylvain's screw-up, right? Ugh, social stuff was hard when it involved nobles, maybe she should try Casper. He seemed nice. Competitive too, which Shay could appreciate, and he just joined Dorothea and Petra, great. It made sense, sure, they were the most lively of the classes at the moment, but it was super inconvenient for Shay. Maybe she should try Ferdinand? She looked at Ferdinand, who somehow already had stacks of notes and books in front of him as he wrote at a rapid pace. She decided not to try Ferdinand. Which left the other odd girl out of their groups. Which, something about her also seemed weirdly familiar. Is that not the girl who was able to defend herself against you during the mock battle? Arvel asked, looking over at Emily. Oh right, that's probably how I know her, Shay replied, wiping away her previous sense of familiarity. With a grin, she approached the brown-haired girl. Hey. Shay greeted as she slid into the seat next to Emily, who looked extremely bored as she stared up at the front of the classroom. Not really at anything, just in that general direction, though she still visibly startled at the sound of Shay's voice. Gah, what? What are you doing? Sitting with you. I figured since today's about inter-house relations and stuff, I should at least sit by an eagle, right? Her stare was extremely suspicious for some reason. And you sat by me specifically, because... Well, part of it is that you're sitting on your own so it's easier to just come up and start talking, but most of it is because you actually kept up with me while I was in my awakened form. Is that what it's called? It's what I call it. So, where are you from? Well, all over the place, mostly, since my dad and sister are mercenaries, as am I of course, but if we're talking about places of origin, I'm actually from Ordelia over in the Alliance. Emily's eyes widened for a second before she regarded Shay with, well, it was kind of hard to tell what she was regarding her with. It wasn't suspicion, but more like Shay had confirmed something? Which was kind of weird. Really? I'm actually from Hrym, myself. I was born there, at least. Oh hey, small world. That's right on the border, right? Yeah, practically the same land. The place I grew up in was pretty cavernous. How about you? Oh, I grew up in the mountains. Just me and my mom, plus some villagers, but they don't really count. Emily huffed in some amusement. No, they really don't. Your mom, huh? What was her name? Periander. How about you, who did you grow up with? She snorted that time, actually smiling a little. Oh, you know. Standard family stuff. I grew up hunting down beasts and vermin. Oh, you hunt? Well, I guess that makes sense. Was it more for sport or for food? Sport, mostly, though I guess there was some necessity to it. Still, you wouldn't really eat vermin, now would you? I've eaten a rat when I was hungry enough. Emily blinked, then gave her a look that was half disgusted and half impressed. Are we being literal about eating right now? Yeah? Why wouldn't we be? Oh, well, it's dirty, isn't it? Shay shrugged. Food's food when you're hungry. Huh. You're interesting, Shay. She glanced towards the front, towards Byleth. So what's the story there? You just happened to find the former knight's captain and his whelp and joined up with them. Pretty much. I mean, there's some specifics to it, sort of a hunting accident thing, and I didn't know who he was at the time. Not that it really mattered, at that point I was just looking for a new mercenary group to join up with. Everything else sort of happened naturally after that. She paused. Also, you probably shouldn't call Byleth a whelp. I know you're a noble and all, but most people consider that rude. Emily scoffed. Fine. I swear, you sound like Selene. She's always nagging me about staying polite and avoiding violence. I was sent by this damned church to kill bandits, was I not supposed to enjoy myself? Probably not. I know I've gotten weird looks for counting my kills on a mission. You do that? Oh sure, it's mostly a competitive thing though. I want to prove I can do better than Byleth, so I usually keep track of my kills to show I got more than her. Ah, showing your superiority then. I can respect that. Oh yeah, so who's Selene? Ugh. An annoyance who thinks she knows better than me. I can introduce you to her later, though, then again, she did get on my case last time, let's just ignore that for now. I'm more curious about what your plans here are anyway. Oh, you know, the basic stuff. Graduate and make a name for myself. Basic, but I can respect it. Do I get to know any specifics, or? I'll tell you when I figure them out. Heh, you tease. Fine, I'll try to be patient. It's what everyone says I need to do at this stupid place anyway. Yeah, I can't say I'm the monastery's biggest fan either, especially with the knights and how weird the archbishop is, Shay muttered, before glancing at her new friend. How about you? Anything you want to do? Fight, hunt, kill. Bathe in the blood of my enemies and reign supreme over the vermin. That sort of thing. Shay just nodded along. So nothing really specific either, huh? Not really. I wanted to win a certain someone's approval, but he's dead now, so that can't happen. Shay would have asked a follow-up question to that, because wow was that statement loaded with implications, but she was interrupted by Professor Hanneman finally addressing the classes. All right, class. Or, classes, as the case currently is. Professor Byleth and I have decided, going forward, we shall be focusing on a different lesson plan than we initially, planned. Due to the importance of the upcoming mission our classes will be cooperating on, we will forego our previous subjects in favor of focusing on theoretical and practical tactics. As such, I will be lecturing for the first portion of our shared class time, followed by Professor Byleth. I understand we are doing things quite differently than usual, so thank you all for being so accommodating. Now, to begin. Yug, great, back to this shit, Emily grumbled, propping her head up on her hand as she barely pretended to listen along. At least she was keeping quiet enough that Hanneman and Byleth didn't hear her. Still, Shay did at least make an attempt to listen as Hanneman was talking about what exactly they would do as the rear guard. For the most part, it seemed that they would be simply traveling alongside a small squad of knights, and dealing with any remaining knights loyal to Lord Lonato while the vanguard dealt with the main forces. There were of course many other factors to take into consideration too, or at least that's what Hanneman was saying. That is what our classes shall be focusing on. I shall be providing several examples on what may occur during our mission, while Professor Byleth shall have you actively practicing them afterwards. During practical practice, I'll be splitting you into two groups, one defensive and one offensive. Byleth explained, before looking over at Ingrid as she raised her hand. Yes, Ingrid. I assume we'll be split between classes and change which side we're on in between attempts. She asked, getting Byleth to shake her head. The groups will be a mix of each class. If we keep the classes split, then we'll only end up hampering one another while in combat. Professor, are you certain that is a good idea? Ferdinand asked. I can see the value in what you are saying, but at the same time, we may just end up at odds with one another in training. Anyone who disrupts training will be reprimanded, and any further disruptions will see them getting punished. Anyone who actively endangers another student will be severely punished. Byleth said, leaving no room for negotiation. Hanneman, you can continue. Thank you. With a nod, Hanneman faced the class again. Now, let's start off with a simple example, Hanneman said as he began to draw on the chalkboard, making a few rudimentary trees to symbolize a forest and some dots to symbolize the students. The most likely scenario we shall face will be encountering random stragglers on our march. He marked some random X's on the map, before making an arrow pointing where the dots would be going. Can anyone tell me what the best course of action for our march would be? Find the stragglers and beat them, Felix said, as if it was simple. That is more of a goal than a strategy, Felix. Perhaps you can give a more concrete plan. I'm a warrior, not a tracker. How should I know how to find them? Are we doing the hunting then? Petra asked. I have much experience with matters of hunting. May I be knowing what the terrain? May I be knowing what the terrain is like? An excellent question, Petra. Knowing the terrain is extremely important when it comes to figuring out how best to face your foe, particularly when they have a homeland advantage. Now, the Gaspard territory is a region in southern Faerghus that is easily accessible from Garreg Mach via travel through Magdrid Way. As Hanneman continued his lecture on the geography of the region, Shay felt her attention starting to slip away from the lesson. She wasn't great with maps in general, so the information was just sort of drifting out of her brain as she heard it. Hanneman could be interesting, but when the topic already bored Shay, she just couldn't focus even if he was being passionate about it. And he wasn't being enthusiastic at the moment, so yeah, it wasn't a big surprise her mind started to wander and she wound up poking an equally bored-looking Emily in the side. The other girl jerked, then shot her a glare that Shay returned with a grin instead. Then Emily poked her back, jabbing her finger hard into Shay's side. GHMN. Shay frowned as her new friend grinned, before trying to jab her back, only to get her hand slapped away instead. Which just turned her small diversion into an actual competition. So the pair promptly spent the next few minutes of class time attempting to jab each other as hard as they could while still being subtle enough not to get caught. It was pretty fun, up until Shay wound up poking Emily a bit too hard and was full-on punched in the face. Shit, Emily cut herself off with a genuine wince. It was just reflex. Shay hissed, ducking her head and glancing around to make sure no one saw that, despite the fact that she was the one who'd just been hit. Thankfully, it looked like everyone was more focused on the lecture, though she did grimace when she noticed Byleth plainly staring at her with an unimpressed look. She gave her sister a sheepish wave, before sitting back with a little huff as she felt at her nose. Ow, you have a really good hook. Thanks. Are you good? Yeah, of course. It's gonna take more than a pretty noble's dainty punch to lay me out, she teased. Well fine, I won't ask the next time I deck you. Oh, so there's going to be a next time. Shay, Emily, don't talk during the lecture, Byleth spoke up, making a number of their classmates glance at the pair, prompting a scowl from Emily and another sheepish grin from Shay. Sorry. We'll be good. Byleth just nodded, prompting a half-amused, half-annoyed noise from Emily. Teacher's pet. Hey, it's different when the teacher's my sister. Sure it is. It means you're sucking up to your big, strong sister instead of trying to score points with the faculty. Lucky for you, she's both, so you only have to brown nose once to get double the rewards. Shay narrowed her eyes at the Eagle student, before smirking and giving her a light kick under the table. Emily turned back to her, her expression flat and unamused, aside from the small twitch to her lips as she tried to hide a grin. You realize this means war, right? Sure does. Just don't kick me out of my seat, all right? No promises. She didn't, though it was a near thing. Check the description for the links to the author.